Imagine a society, like right now, that looks at the invention of the smartphone or the internet, the modern 40-hour work week, and honestly, the entire philosophical concept of individualism.
Right.
And they just decide, completely voluntarily, by the way, to build this massive 3,000-year-old wall to keep it all out.
It's wild to think about.
It really is. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are opening up your research notes, the ones you sent in, to look at a community that is pulling off what is probably the most successful radical rejection of modernity on the planet.
Yeah, we're talking about Haredi, or, Ultra-Orthodox Judaism.
Exactly.
And it is just a staggering phenomenon to observe, especially when you understand the etymology of the word itself.
Right, because Haredi isn't just some political label.
No, not at all. It wasn't cooked up by sociologists or anything. It derives from the Hebrew word erd, which translates literally to one who trembles before God.
Wow, one who trembles.
Yeah. And that implies this really intense, all-encompassing discipline, a moral seriousness that shapes literally every waking second. It's this state of constant visceral awe.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because our mission today is to look way past the distinct clothing, the separate neighborhoods in Brooklyn or Jerusalem, and those superficial media portrayals we always see.
Right, the stuff that just scratches the surface.
Exactly. We want to deconstruct the complex psychological, historical, and philosophical engine that actually drives this community.
And to do that, we're going to use a really specific lens that you, the listener, provided in your notes.
Yes, this is such a cool concept. You introduced us to this incredibly detailed sub-personality. It's like a thought experiment that you call Devin.
The Devin persona is just a brilliant analytical tool for this topic. Right? Based on the framework you outlined, Devin is someone who values absolute truth, relentless resilience, rigorous discipline, and facing guilt directly.
Right, seeking actual tangible redemption.
Exactly. Devin demands structural accountability to ensure mistakes are not repeated.
Devin doesn't want, cheap grace. Devin wants to do the really hard work of ethical refinement. And as I was reading through the stack of research you compiled, I realized that exploring Haredi Judaism through the lens of Devin is sort of like putting two incredibly disciplined, unyielding forces in the exact same room.
Oh, absolutely, because they share the exact same operating system of, intense moral accountability.
Right. But as we'll see, they're going to have a massive violent clash on one core issue.
The source of ultimate authority.
Exactly. But before we just drop Devin into a modern Haredi yeshiva and see what happens, we really need to understand how that yeshiva got there in the first place.
Right, because from the outside, there's this really pervasive myth that the Haredi community is just a time capsule.
Like they've just been frozen in amber since the year 500 BCE or something.
Yeah, like this is exactly how all Jewish people lived 1,000 years ago.
The idea that they just, missed the memo on the Renaissance.
Exactly. But your notes highlight that Haredi Judaism, as a distinct, organized movement, actually emerged much, much later. We were talking about late 18th and 19th century Eastern Europe.
Right, places like Poland, Lithuania, Hungary, Galicia.
Yeah, and it wasn't a new religion forming out of nowhere. It was a reaction.
A reaction to what, exactly?
It was a highly organized defensive response to a pair of massive cultural earthquakes that were simultaneously shaking European Jewry to its core.
Okay, what was the first earthquake?
The first was the Haskalah, which is the Jewish Enlightenment. For centuries, Jewish communities in Europe had been largely insular. They lived in shtetls, governed their own internal affairs according to Jewish law, and faced, severe external restrictions.
Right, they were forced to be separate.
Right. But then the broader European Enlightenment happens, and the walls begin to come down. So the Haskalah was this internal movement pushing Jews to integrate into that new, broader European society.
Like advocating for secular education, right?
Yeah, exactly. Adopting local languages like German or Polish instead of just speaking Yiddish. Basically, assimilating culturally.
So let's put ourselves in the shoes of a traditional rabbi in, say, 1850s Europe. You've spent your entire life mastering these ancient texts, and suddenly the brilliant young men in your community are reading Immanuel Kant.
Right.
They're going to secular universities. They're shaving their beards to look like modern European citizens. I mean, it wouldn't just feel like a shift in fashion.
No, it would feel like the entire foundation of your civilization was just dissolving beneath your feet. It was perceived as a total existential threat.
And then there's the second earthquake, which I imagine just compounded that panic.
Oh, absolutely. the birth of Reform Judaism. This wasn't just about young people reading secular philosophy on the side. This was an organized movement actively modifying traditional religious practices to fit the modern era.
So what were they actually changing?
Well, reformers started introducing choral singing with organs into the synagogue. They started conducting prayers in the vernacular German instead of Hebrew.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and suggesting that many of the ancient ritual laws were, no longer binding.
So the threat wasn't just external assimilation anymore. The threat was coming from inside the house.
Exactly. The operating system itself was being rewritten.
And the response from the traditionalist leaders, the ones who would eventually form the foundation of the Haredi world, was completely uncompromising, right?
Completely. There's a figure in your research, Rabbi Moses Sofer.
The Chatham Sofer.
Right, the Chatham Sofer. He's operating in Hungary in the early 1800s, and he establishes a motto that essentially becomes the battle cry of this entire movement.
Right, and the quote is, anything new is forbidden by the Torah.
Yes. Chadash or min haTorah. He took a very specific, kind of obscure Talmudic ruling about not eating new grain before a certain harvest offering, and he radically expanded it into this sweeping, totalizing cultural policy.
Okay, I have to push back on that, though, because to a modern ear, you hear anything new is forbidden, and it sounds like literal intellectual suicide.
I mean, it does to us, sure.
Yeah. Right, because we live in a world that worships innovation. We believe that if you don't adapt, you die. It seems like the traditionalists saw the cultural software updating all around them in Europe. And instead of, I don't know, downloading the patch to make their religion compatible with modernity.
They just ripped the Ethernet cord right out of the wall.
Exactly. They just unplugged it.
They absolutely ripped the cord out. But here's the thing. They didn't view it as intellectual suicide. They viewed it as building an impenetrable firewall to keep the original code completely pristine.
So they didn't see themselves as starting a new, ultra-strict sect.
No, not at all. To the Haredi mind, they were simply holding the line. They firmly believed they were serving as the faithful continuation of rabbinic Judaism.
So they trace a direct, unbroken chain.
Right, all the way back to the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans in 70 CE. They rely on the Talmud, medieval legal codes like those Maimonides, and the deep mysticism of Kabbalah.
They basically saw the reform movement as an amputation.
Yes, and their strictness was the tourniquet to stop the bleeding.
Wow. The narrative was basically, we aren't the ones who changed. The world went mad, and we just refused to join the madness.
Exactly.
And looking at the history that followed, you can sort of see why that defensive posture hardened in the absolute granite. Because the ultimate tragedy of the 20th century violently validated all their deepest fears about European assimilation.
The Holocaust.
Yeah.
The destruction was nearly total. The vibrant shtetls, the massive, prestigious academies of learning in Lithuania and Poland, the millions of adherents just annihilated.
The centers of traditional Jewish life were turned to ash.
But the survivors who managed to escape or who somehow endured the camps eventually rebuilt in places like Israel, New York, London, and Antwerp.
And what really baffles the secular mind, I think, is the psychological reaction to that trauma.
How so?
Well, you might assume that after experiencing literally the worst persecution in human history, the survivors would want to blend in. They would want to modernize, drop the distinctive clothing, and just become invisible to avoid ever being targeted again. But they did the exact opposite.
They did, because if a culture is almost entirely erased, the survivors often feel this sacred, unyielding duty to recreate every single detail of what was lost.
So they couldn't save the physical buildings of the European yeshivas.
Right, so they rebuilt them in Brooklyn and Jerusalem with a vengeance. The trauma of near annihilation just intensified their commitment to exact preservation.
The firewall didn't just stay up, it got way thicker.
Reinforced with the agonizing memory of martyrdom.
Wow. So that historical crucible builds the walls. But if we only look at the walls, we miss the entire point of what they're actually protecting.
Absolutely.
Because if you just drive through a Haredi neighborhood, you might just assume it's a life of blind obedience, just people walking around terrified of breaking some arbitrary rule. But the sources you provided reveal this intensely complex intellectual and spiritual ecosystem inside that fortress.
And that ecosystem is built entirely on the concept of halakha, which translates loosely to the way or the path, but practically it means the comprehensive body of Jewish divine law.
Right.
To really understand the psychology of a Haredi Jew, you have to grasp their foundational premise regarding revelation. They believe that both the written Torah, the Hebrew Bible, and the oral Torah which is the vast sea of explanations and laws eventually codified in the Talmud, were given directly by God to Moses at Mount Sinai.
So it's a literal transmission.
Literal, direct from the creator of the universe.
Which means the text isn't just a collection of ancient Near Eastern wisdom literature. It's perfect, it's eternal, and humans basically do not possess the security clearance to edit it.
Exactly. And because of that divine origin, Jewish law isn't a weekend hobby. It is a comprehensive legal framework governing every conceivable micro-detail of human existence.
Like obvious things, right? What you can eat, business ethics.
Sure. Kosher food, marital purity, ethical business. But it also dictates how you tie your shoes in the morning.
Wait, literally? Tying your shoes.
Yes. Tying the left before the right to honor the left side, which is associated with the tefillin.
Oh, wow.
It dictates the exact blessing you must whisper after using the restroom, acknowledging the intricate functioning of the human body.
I really want to pause on that because this is where a secular listener or even someone from a more liberal religious background might feel totally lost.
Sounds extreme.
Yeah. Like, why would the creator of the cosmos care about the sequence of my shoelaces? It feels suffocating. It feels like micromanagement on a cosmic scale.
Well, it feels suffocating if you view freedom entirely as the ability to make unconstrained choices.
Right.
But the halakhic framework views those micro-laws as a technology for mindfulness. If you have to think about how you tie your shoes, how you wash your hands, and what you say before you take a single bite of an apple, you have successfully eliminated the concept of secular space.
There is literally no mundane moment.
None. You cannot separate your spiritual life from your real life. The explicit purpose of human existence in this worldview is entirely bound up in serving God through the Torah and the mitzvah, the commandments.
So this mortal life is viewed merely as like a vestibule, right? A preparation for Olam Haba, the world to come.
Yes. And the focus isn't on theological speculation about what heaven looks like. It's not about that. The focus is on the rigorous daily execution of the law right here, right now, to earn your place there.
And the absolute zenith of that execution, the highest possible achievement in the society, brings us to something that completely shifted my perspective.
Torah study.
Yeah, Torah study. Because I used to think of religious study as, you know, a way to become a better person or maybe to train to be a clergy member. But your notes showed that in the Haredi world, a man studying Talmud isn't just reading a book.
No, not at all. He is literally keeping the universe from disintegrating.
See, that is wild.
It is a literal cosmic mechanism. The Talmudic concept is that the physical world only continues to exist because the breath of people studying Torah sustains it.
It's a breath itself.
Yeah. So when you picture a young man in a yeshiva swaying over a massive ancient text for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, he isn't acquiring skills for the job market.
Right.
He is performing cosmic maintenance.
He is a load-bearing pillar of reality.
Yes. And that profound belief completely reorders their societal values. It is why these communities prioritize intellectual achievement in sacred texts over material wealth.
Right. The billionaire businessman is respected, sure, but he is fundamentally viewed as a support system for the scholar.
Exactly. Communities pool massive financial resources to support full-time learners in a system called the kollel. That's where married men receive a stipend to do nothing but study law all day, often while their wives work to support the family.
But what exactly are they doing for 12 hours? I mean, if the laws were written down centuries ago, shouldn't you just read them once and memorize them?
You would think so?
Why does it take a lifetime of all-day study? You described it in the notes as a cross between constitutional law, dense philosophy, and high-stakes chess.
That's the best way to describe it.
Can we walk through an actual example just to show the listener what this intellectual martial arts actually looks like?
Well, absolutely. Let's look at a classic foundational text studied in almost every yeshiva, the Tractate of Baba Metzia, which deals with civil law.
Okay, set the scene.
Imagine the opening scenario. The Mishnah, that's the core text, presents a case. Two men are holding a single garment. One man says, "I found it. It is entirely mine." The other man says, "No, I found it. It is entirely mine." How does a judge resolve this when there are absolutely no witnesses?
Okay, well, a modern judge might just say, cut it in half, or sell it and split the money.
Right. And the Mishnah's ruling is that they both must swear an oath that they own no less than half of it, and then they divide it.
Okay. Seems straightforward enough.
But the study doesn't stop there. The Gemara, which is the vast commentary surrounding the Mishnah, jumps in and starts aggressively dissecting the logic.
Right, asking the hard question.
Exactly. Like, why make them swear an oath at all if one of them is obviously lying? Are we encouraging perjury?
Oh, that's a good point.
And what if one man claims the whole garment, but the second man only claims half? How does the math work then?
Wait, if one claims the whole and one claims half, you wouldn't just split it 50-50 anymore.
Exactly. The Talmudic logic dictates that you only divide the disputed portion.
Oh, interesting.
Right, so the man claiming the whole garment automatically gets the half that the second man isn't even claiming, because there's no dispute over that half.
Okay, I'm following.
Then they divide the remaining half, the disputed half. So the first man gets 3/4, and the second man gets 1/4.
That is incredibly precise.
It is.
But they don't just stop at the math, right? You mentioned that they argue fiercely about the hypothetical.
Oh, it gets so intense.
Yeah.
You sit with a study partner, a chavrusa, and you just battle over the text. You literally yell across the table at each other.
Over a hypothetical coat.
Yes. What if the garment is interwoven with gold thread on one side? What if one man is holding the fringes and the other is holding the bulk of the fabric? You are pulling in opinions from a rabbi in 3rd century Babylon, pitting it against an argument from an 11th century French commentator like Rashi.
Wow.
And then testing it against a legal code from 16th century Safed. You're engaging in a conversation that spans 2 millennia, demanding staggering logical precision to extract the pure, divine will hidden inside a dispute over a coat.
It's brilliant. It actively cultivates extremely sharp analytical thinkers. It really rewards precision.
Yes, it does.
But there's a boundary, isn't there? You can argue inside the game. In fact, you're expected to argue inside the game, but you cannot throw the board.
Right. You can debate the application of the law, but the moment you say maybe God didn't actually give this law to Moses, you are exiled from the conversation.
You cannot question the axiom.
But within the axiom, the intellectual freedom is just vast.
Still, maintaining that level of intensity, studying dense civil and ritual law for 12 hours a day, strictly controlling your diet, your speech, your clothing, I mean, it seems psychologically unsustainable.
It's a lot.
Human beings get exhausted. We get distracted. How does a community maintain this level of hypervigilance in the modern era, where our attention spans have been completely shredded by algorithms?
They maintain it through a deeply realistic psychological worldview. The Haredi framework doesn't view humans as inherently angelic, nor does it view them as inherently depraved.
Okay, so how do they see us?
It views human psychology as a constant grinding battlefield between two opposing forces. The Yetzer Hatav, which is the inclination toward altruism, discipline, and obeying God, and the Yetzer Hara, the inclination towards selfishness, base physical desires, and ego.
So the villain isn't some abstract demon. The villain is your own biological urge to sleep in, or to eat something delicious but non-kosher, or to, I don't know, gossip about your neighbor.
Exactly. The main human problem is simply forgetting the divine presence because you are too absorbed in your own comfort.
And the antidote to that constant forgetting is a grueling process of ethical refinement, right? Known as musar.
Yes, musar. It is the active, daily cultivation of virtues like humility, intellectual endurance, and self-control.
And this is exactly where the Devin persona steps back into the spotlight.
Oh, totally.
The virtues the Haredi world is obsessively cultivating through Musar are exactly what Devin values. Devin demands that if you make a mistake, you don't just offer a shallow apology.
Right, you implement structural accountability.
You track your behavior, you build a system to ensure you don't fail again. The Haredi system is basically a lifelong 247 boot camp for Devin's exact brand of ethical refinement.
But it's a boot camp that requires massive infrastructure to sustain. Because, let's face it, willpower alone is a finite resource.
Yeah, it depletes by, Tuesday afternoon.
Exactly. So to keep this engine running across a lifetime, the Haredi community uses time and memory as their actual structural infrastructure. They have completely decoupled their existence from secular time.
I really need you to expand on that. Because for most of us, time is dictated by, the fiscal quarter, the 9-to-5 workday, the ping of an email, the weekend. Our time is organized around productivity and consumption.
Right. But their time is organized entirely around the rhythms of the covenant.
What does that look like on a daily basis?
Well, you have the daily rhythm, 3 mandatory prayer services, morning, which is Shacharit, afternoon, Mincha, and evening, Mariv.
So you have to stop whatever you're doing.
Yes. This forces you to stop your work, gather with a quorum of men, and reorient yourself toward Jerusalem 3 times a day.
And then there's the weekly rhythm.
Anchored by the Sabbath, Shabbat. From sundown on Friday to nightfall on Saturday, all commerce ceases. All technology ceases.
Driving, no phones.
No turning on light switches, no writing. It is a total radical cessation of creative manipulation of the world.
Just imagine the psychological reset of that. We talk so much about digital detoxes today, but Shabbat is a mandated, non-negotiable weekly severing from the noise of the secular world.
And then you layer the annual rhythm on top of that.
The holidays.
Right. Passover, reenacting the Exodus from Egypt.
Yeah.
Shavuot, marking the giving of the Torah at Sinai. Sukkot, where you literally move out of your permanent house into a fragile hut to remember the wilderness journey. Yom Kippur for fasting and national atonement.
It's literally a civilization built on cycles of time.
Yes.
And paired with that sacred time is sacred memory. You aren't just an individual floating aimlessly through the 21st century. Children are raised on these visceral stories of biblical patriarchs, of medieval rabbis facing down inquisitions, of their own grandfather surviving Auschwitz.
You are acutely aware that you are a crucial link in a 3,000-year-old chain. And your adherence to the law is what keeps the chain from breaking. That historical weight shapes every single decision you make.
Looking at all of this, the rejection of secular time, the intense focus on ancient texts, the physical boundaries, I want to propose a reframing from you notes.
Okay, let's hear it.
Usually we label Haredi culture as ultra-conservative. But if you think about mainstream modern society, a society obsessed with mindless consumerism, hyper-individualism, and being permanently attached to a screen, isn't Haredi culture actually the ultimate radical counterculture?
I think that is probably the most accurate sociological definition you could apply.
I struggle with the word counterculture, though. Because usually when we say counterculture, we picture the 1960s, right? Hippies, rebellion, throwing off all the rules, ultimate freedom.
Wait.
The Haredi world looks like the absolute opposite of that. It looks like ultimate rigid conformity. How can putting on a uniform and following 10,000 rules be a counterculture?
Because the mainstream culture they are countering is the ethos of the 1960s.
Oh, that's a great point.
Mainstream culture today preaches that ultimate freedom is the absence of all constraints, that you should follow every desire, and that individual autonomy is the highest possible God.
Right.
The Haredi community rebels against that by saying, your freedom is actually slavery to your impulses and to corporate algorithms. True freedom is found in submitting to divine constraint.
Wow. So they enforce that rebellion through physical and digital boundaries. The distinctive clothing, the black hats, the long coats, the modest dresses. It isn't just an antiquated fashion choice.
No, it's a psychological barrier.
It's a constant visual reminder to themselves and to everyone walking past them on the street that they are separate. They are not playing the same game as the rest of the world.
And they maintain entirely separate educational systems to ensure the secular worldview. Things like Darwinian evolution or secular literary critique does not dilute the religious worldview.
They heavily limit exposure to secular media, movies, literature.
But, and this is crucial, they are not Luddites. They don't reject technology simply because it was invented after 1850. They employ a really sophisticated strategy of selective adoption.
The concept of the kosher internet. This completely blew my mind when I read the notes.
It's fascinating.
They don't just smash all the computers. They use specialized filters, or they buy custom-built smartphones that literally strip away the open web, social media, and all entertainment apps.
Right. The device is reduced to a pure utility.
Maybe just email, WhatsApp for community organizing, and a banking app. They neuter the technology so it can be used for commerce without infecting the user with the surrounding culture.
Is preservation through insulation. But, from the outside, looking at those thick walls and the uniform black and white clothing, it is very, very easy to assume that everyone inside that fortress is just a clone.
Right, that they're all exactly the same.
But the truth is, once you cross the threshold, you realize Haredi is not a monolith. It is a wildly diverse, sometimes fractured, internal ecosystem.
It's a family of different traditions that happen to share the same strict adherence to the law, but they have profoundly different psychological approaches to it.
Absolutely.
Your notes break down the major subgroups.
Yeah.
So let's start with the Hasidic groups. To an outsider, these are often the most visually recognizable, right? The men wearing the fur hats, the shtreimels, on Shabbat, the specific long coats, groups like Satmar, Bells, Gur, or Shabbat.
Right. The Hasidic movement actually started as a populist revival back in the 18th century. Today, they emphasize a really profound mystical joy in worship.
Joy is a big part of it.
Yes, they believe in ecstatic singing, known as nigunim, which are often these beautiful wordless melodies meant to elevate the soul. And they use dancing as a direct pathway to connect with God.
And structurally, they're unique, too.
Very. The defining feature of a Hasidic group is their devotion to a specific spiritual mentor and dynastic leader known as a Rebbe.
Right.
The Rebbe is not just a smart teacher, he is viewed as a conduit for divine grace. He's a guide who must be consulted on everything from arranged marriages to, business deals.
Now contrast that ecstatic, heart-driven approach with the Lithuanian or yeshivish group.
Right. Totally different vibe.
These are the descendants of the Mitnagdim, the traditionalists who initially opposed the Hasidic movement because they thought all that singing and dancing was, well, a distraction from serious study.
Exactly. The yeshivish world is intensely intellectual. Their entire existence revolves around the rigorous, logical dissection of the Talmud we discussed earlier. It is a very austere, mind-driven approach.
And then adding an entirely different cultural flavor, you have the Sephardi Haredim.
Right. These are communities rooted in the Middle Eastern and North African traditions. Jews who immigrated to Israel from places like Morocco, Iraq, or Yemen.
So they brought their own distinct customs?
Yes, their own historical legal rulings, their own poetry into the broader Haredi framework. While they have adopted some of the strictures of the European yeshiva world, they definitely maintain a distinctly different historical memory and cultural pride.
But regardless of which specific internal faction they belong to, there is a demographic reality sweeping across the entire Haredi spectrum that is radically reshaping the political landscape, particularly in the state of Israel.
Oh, massively.
And it all comes down to their absolute emphasis on family.
Fulfilling the biblical commandment to be fruitful and multiply is paramount. Large families are the norm, often ranging from 6 to 10 children or more.
Wow.
And because of these extremely high birth rates, combined with a rejection of secular birth control norms, the Haredi population is just exploding.
Right.
Major hubs in the diaspora like Brooklyn or Lakewood in New Jersey are growing rapidly, but the most profound geopolitical impact is definitely occurring in Israel.
Let's break down how this demographic explosion translates into hard political power, because Israel has a parliamentary system with proportional representation, right?
Yes, you have 120 seats in the Knesset. To form a government, a prime minister needs a majority coalition of at least 61 seats.
And the major secular or center-right parties rarely get enough seats to govern alone.
Exactly. They are basically forced to negotiate with smaller parties to reach that magic number 61.
And this is where the Haredi political parties come in.
Right. Primarily, United Torah Judaism, representing the Ashkenazi factions, and Shas, representing the Sephardi voters. They usually secure a solid block of seats, often around 10 to 15% of the parliament.
So they operate as the ultimate kingmakers.
They really do. They typically do not demand the prime minister's seat. Instead, they demand highly specific, unyielding concessions in exchange for joining the coalition.
They sell their votes to protect the firewall.
Exactly.
They demand massive state subsidies for their independent religious school networks, which often do not teach core secular subjects like math and English.
Right.
They fight fiercely to maintain their historic exemption from mandatory military service in the IDF, arguing that their Torah study protects the nation just as much as an F-16 fighter jet.
And they ensure the state maintains rabbinic authority over all Jewish marriages and divorces, and they strictly enforce public Sabbath laws, like shutting down public transportation on Saturdays.
It's incredible leverage. And demographers predict that within a few decades, they could become the demographic majority among Israeli Jews.
Which isn't just a political shift. It is a fundamental transformation of the nature of the state itself, creating intense friction with the secular majority who, bear the brunt of the military service and the tax burden.
So we have this massive, growing, incredibly strict, insulated community that is gaining immense political power while demanding total submission to ancient laws. Here is a question that you, the listener, asked in your research notes, and it's a profound one. Why do outsiders convert?
That's a great question.
Why would someone raised in our hyper-modern secular world where you have the absolute freedom to eat whatever you want, sleep with whoever you want, and define your own reality voluntarily surrender that freedom to enter this intensely restrictive lifestyle?
Right. The phenomena is called becoming a Baal Teshuvah, a returnee to the faith. And while conversions or returns of this magnitude are statistically rare, the psychological motivations of those who do are deeply revealing about the hidden anxieties of the modern world.
What's the primary motivation?
The first one is a desperate craving for structure and meaning. In modern secular society, you are forced to invent your own purpose. You have to decide what matters.
And that endless freedom can induce a paralyzing existential dread.
Exactly. Haredi life cures that dread by providing a comprehensive, totalizing framework. Every single action from morning to night has a clear divine purpose.
It's the ultimate relief from choice fatigue. You don't have to wonder if your life has meaning. The law tells you exactly how much meaning is embedded in the way you wash your hands.
The second motivation is the intellectual depth. The staggering rigor of Talmudic debate attracts brilliant minds who crave a philosophical and logical challenge that they feel shallow, modern culture simply cannot provide.
That makes a lot of sense.
Third, there is the unparalleled community support. In a secular world suffering from an epidemic of loneliness, isolation, and digital alienation, the Haredi community offers a tight-knit safety net.
They support each other with childcare, massive free loan societies called gamocs, and immense, tangible social solidarity.
And finally, there is the craving for absolute moral clarity. We live in a world drowning in relativism. Everything is subjective. Everything is a gray area. Your truth is your truth.
Right.
For certain personalities, a system that provides definitive, unchanging, non-negotiable answers about right and wrong, about ethical responsibility, is incredibly magnetic.
And that craving for absolute clarity brings us to the great theological debate within Judaism itself, because the Haredi approach of building a wall is just one answer to the challenge of the Enlightenment.
Right.
To truly understand the Haredi worldview, we have to look at how they position themselves against the rest of the Jewish world that chose differently.
Let's map out that spectrum. And just to be completely clear to you listening, we're going to impartially map this out based on the sources you provided.
Yes, we are not taking sides or endorsing any specific theology here. We're strictly analyzing the philosophical architecture and historical development of these different movements.
Right. So the entire modern spectrum of Judaism can effectively mapped by asking one explosive question.
Which is?
How much of traditional Jewish law is binding today? And who has the authority to change it?
Okay. On the strictest end of the spectrum, you have the Haredi view we've been deeply exploring. The law is entirely divine, eternal, and cannot be altered by humans.
Right.
Moving slightly along the spectrum, we find modern Orthodox Judaism.
Modern Orthodox Judaism shares the fundamental premise with the Haredi world. The halakha, the law, is fully binding. They keep strict kosher diets. They strictly observe the Sabbath.
So what's the difference?
The divergence is not primarily theological, it is sociological. Modern Orthodoxy embraces a philosophy often called Torah umada, which means Torah combined with worldly knowledge.
Right, so a modern Orthodox Jew will strictly observe the Sabbath, but they will also enthusiastically attend Harvard Medical School, read secular literature, and integrate into professional careers.
Yes. They believe you can fully participate in the modern world while fully adhering to the ancient law.
And the Haredi response to that is basically, you are playing with fire. If you expose yourself to secular philosophy, it is only a matter of time before it compromises your faith.
Exactly. Now, moving further along the spectrum, we encounter conservative Judaism. The core philosophy here is that Jewish law is indeed binding, but it is not frozen.
Okay.
They believe the Torah is sacred, but acknowledge it has been shaped by historical processes. Therefore, they argue that the rabbis of today possess the authority to reinterpret and adapt the law to address modern realities, much like the Talmudic rabbis did in their era.
So this is the mechanism that allows for adaptation while trying to remain within a legal framework. This is why the conservative movement can make rulings that allow women to be ordained as rabbis or, permit driving a car to the synagogue on the Sabbath if you live too far to walk.
Exactly. They are attempting to balance the preservation of tradition with the necessity of historical evolution.
Then we reach Reform Judaism, which, as we discussed, emerged during the Enlightenment.
Right. The central mechanism of the Reform movement is a fundamental shift in priority. They argue that Judaism is primarily an ethical and spiritual tradition, not a strictly legal one.
So the moral teachings are binding, but the rituals aren't.
Exactly. The moral teachings of the prophets, justice, compassion, ethics are binding. But the vast majority of the ritual laws, such as the intricate dietary restrictions or the complex Sabbath prohibitions, are viewed as voluntary practices that individuals can adopt if they find them spiritually meaningful.
Reform places a massive emphasis on tikkun olam, repairing the world through social justice, and prioritizes personal autonomy in deciding how to practice the religion.
Yes. And finally, you have Reconstructionist Judaism, founded in the 20th century in America by Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan.
This is the most philosophically liberal branch, right?
Yes. They view Judaism not primarily as a supernatural religion, based on divine revelation, but as an evolving cultural civilization.
Yeah.
In Reconstructionism, the concept of God is often understood in non-supernatural terms.
Like, perhaps as the force in the universe that makes salvation or ethical behavior possible.
Exactly. The community itself, rather than ancient texts, holds the authority to define what practices are meaningful and relevant for the current generation.
So understanding that full spectrum from Reconstructionist to Reform to Conservative to Modern Orthodox, what does this mean for the Haredi perspective?
Well, when a Haredi thinker looks at this spectrum, they do not see beautiful, diverse branches of a shared, thriving tree.
They view the liberal movements as tragic errors that are actively dissolving Judaism.
We have to step inside the mechanics of their reasoning. It all goes back to the absolute authority of the revelation at Sinai. If God literally gave the law, mere humans do not possess the jurisdiction to edit it.
Right.
To the Haredi mind, changing the commandments to fit modern sensibilities isn't a clever adaptation, it is a breach of the fundamental contract.
The core concept here is the Mizurah. Your notes describe the Mizurah as a sacred, unbroken chain of transmission. God to Moses, Moses to Joshua, Joshua to the prophets to the men of the Great Assembly, down through the Talmudic sages, the medieval scholars, straight to the rabbis sitting in Brooklyn or Jerusalem today.
Think of the Mizorah as a high-stakes, multi-millennial game of telephone, where the survival of the entire civilization depends on not dropping a single syllable.
Wow.
The Haredi argument is that if you break that chain of transmission, if a group of rabbis in the 19th or 21st century decides they have the authority to cut out the parts of the law that feel inconvenient or out of step with modern Western values, you lose the essence of the religion itself.
They also make a deeply psychological argument against the liberal movements, don't they?
Yes, they do.
They believe that human nature, the Yetzer Hara, naturally seeks the path of least resistance. We want comfort, we want fewer obligations, we want to fit in with our neighbors.
Right. So when they look at a movement that says you no longer have to keep these restrictive dietary laws and you can assimilate into the broader culture, the Haredi thinker says, you didn't receive a new divine revelation. You just bent the religion to fit your human desire for an easier life.
It is a massive, existential, philosophical gamble on all sides.
Truly.
The Reform and liberal movements gamble that religion must adapt, loosen, and integrate with modern ethics to survive and remain relevant to modern people. The Haredi movement gambles that altering the law is the very thing that destroys it.
And when you challenge the Haredi world, when you ask them for proof that their rigid, unyielding gamble is the right one, they just point to the scoreboard of history. They say, look at the last 2,000 years. We survived exile, we survived pogroms, we survived empires rising and falling because we built a fortress of strict adherence to the law.
The communities throughout history that loosened their grip on the tradition, the ones that compromised with the Greeks or the Romans or the Enlightenment, where are they? They assimilated and disappeared.
Exactly. Which brings us to the ultimate psychological collision for you, the listener, and the Devin persona we established at the beginning.
Yes, let's bring it all back to Devin. We have laid out the traumatic history, the intricate legal mechanics, the grueling psychology of Musar, the diverse internal factions, and the intense spectrum of Jewish thought. Now, let's put Devin to the final test.
Let's do it. Because on paper, the alignment between Devin and the Haredi worldview is incredibly strong.
Devin values intense discipline, intellectual rigor, and heavy moral accountability. Devin believes that if you do something wrong, you don't just brush it off with a quick apology. You face the guilt, you do the grueling work, and you change your behavior over a long period of time to earn tangible redemption.
And that is a near-perfect reflection of the traditional Jewish ethical worldview. The Haredi concept of lifelong ethical refinement, the rigorous daily accounting of one's actions, the belief that true repentance teshuvah must be proven through changed habits when faced with the same temptation.
Devin would look at that system and deeply respect the gravity of it.
Devin hates superficiality, and there's absolutely nothing superficial about Haredi moral demands.
But, and here's the rub, there's a fatal fault line here. Devin has a fatal flaw when it comes to integrating into this system.
Devin is fiercely independent.
Yes, Devin is deeply skeptical of authority figures. For Devin, truth is something you wrestle with, dissect, and discover through your own individual solitary reckoning. You do the work yourself, and you trust your own logic above all else.
And that is exactly where the violent collision occurs. Because Haredi Judaism demands, fundamentally, submission to rabbinic authority.
Right.
You do not discover ultimate truth entirely on your own. Truth is inherited through that sacred communal chain, the Masorah. You can debate the law, you can argue the Talmud for 12 hours a day using brilliant logic, but ultimately at the end of the argument, you yield to the consensus of the tradition and the authority of the sages, known as Das Torah.
Devin trusts Devin's logic. The Haredi system demands that Devin subjugate that logic to the wisdom of the rabbis who came centuries before. Devin believes in the sanctity of the individual mind. The Haredi system believes in the sanctity of the collective continuity.
This raises the ultimate philosophical question for Devin, and really for any modern person observing this tradition.
What's the question?
Would someone like Devin be willing to surrender their ultimate intellectual autonomy to a system, even if they deeply admired its discipline, its structural accountability, and its moral gravity? Is ultimate truth discovered by the lone, brilliant individual scaling the mountain alone? Or is it inherited, passed down hand to hand, through a sacred continuity that requires you to subjugate your ego to the wisdom of the collective past?
That is the profound, unanswerable question at the heart of this entire deep dive, and it's exactly where we need to wrap up today's exploration of your notes. We've traveled from the terrifying, shifting landscapes of 19th century Europe into the towering 12-hour-a-day intellectual arenas of the yeshivas.
We've looked at the intense psychological struggle against human nature and the raw political power of demographics.
We have seen how Haredi Judaism is far from being a mindless anti-education relic. It is a highly intellectual, profoundly disciplined, and complex engine of cultural preservation.
We've explored their strategy of intensification, building higher, thicker walls, precisely when the world demands you tear them down. And we've looked at the vibrant, diverse ecosystem living within those walls, constantly balancing on that tension between personal autonomy and sacred, unyielding law.
But before we sign off, I know you have one final provocative thought you want to leave the listener with, something for them to mull over that builds on the idea of those Haredi boundaries.
I do. I want you to think back to the concept of the kosher internet and the strict boundaries the Haredi world places on secular media.
Okay.
From our modern secular vantage point, we almost instinctively view those restrictions as a tragic loss of freedom. We pity them for not having access to everything all the time.
Right, we think they're missing out.
But look, honestly, at our society today. Our attention is constantly hijacked by algorithms designed by corporations to monetize our outrage. We are drowning in endless scrolling, paralyzed by information overload, and our collective mental health is fracturing under the weight of constant, inescapable digital noise.
We think we are free because we have smartphones, but we are actually just captives to a different kind of prism.
Yes. So the provocative thought I want to leave you with is this. You do not have to adopt their theology or believe in their ancient laws to wonder if they understand something fundamental about the human mind that we have arrogantly forgotten. In an age of total digital saturation and algorithmic manipulation, is it possible that true freedom actually requires adopting their strategy of voluntary, rigid constraints? Is the only way to preserve your own mind, your own focus, and your own humanity to build a firewall just as thick as theirs?
That brings us right back to the beginning. The wall, the fortress, keeping the invisible threats out so the core code of who you are can survive. Thank you so much for bringing these incredible notes to the table. This has been a massive paradigm shift. Keep exploring, keep questioning the world around you, and keep diving deep.